emotional intelligence, and the 5 core components of EI. So as a reminder, emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, assess, and control your own emotions and be aware of the emotions of others. Now I'm going to break down the 5 core components within, or the competencies within emotional intelligence. Everything hinges or sits on the foundation of self-awareness. It is the most important. Without self-awareness, you can't regulate. The next one is self-motivation, moving on into empathy and ultimately to interpersonal relationships. So let's break those down. Years ago, I coined the following phrase based upon the things that I've observed. When your awareness is raised, you see the invisible, you hear the unheard, and you understand the incomprehensible. Because if you don't see, hear, or understand what's there, and that's all around you, what causes you to be flooded, what causes you to fragment, what causes you to lose your cookies, they will control you. It's critical you start increasing your awareness of what's happening in your life. So we start with self-awareness. By definition, self-awareness is recognizing and understanding your emotions and intrapersonal relationships, that's you, upstairs, downstairs. You want to know what causes them, what causes you to be the way you are, what impact those have on others, interpersonal relationships, and then what impact do others' behaviors have on you? In other words, what level of codependence are you? How much do you carry inside you? How many grudges are you holding? Because all of those impact your health. And then lastly, your interpersonal is what impact do you have on the world. Anger is the number one offender in the emotional spectrum. Are you aware? I have so many people walk in who do not or who deny that they got an anger issue. Anger doesn't have to be manifested in slamming the table, cussing, and throwing tables over. Passive aggressive is anger. You're just doing it differently. You can be angry and carry a pretty even-keeled voice, but have an agenda, very manipulative and very controlling. Anger skews judgment. It alters the brain. It reduces rationality, decreases the likelihood that you're going to have any kind of awareness. It's associated with pride and bullying. And let me comment, pride is another word for fear. So men, they don't typically demonstrate fear. They actually deny that they have fear. What it really is it comes out as anger and frustration and bullying. That's a fear-based, cowardly position to be in. It fragments the brain, which we talked about, and then it medicates your false narrative. So I just want to share a little humorous poem with you. Perhaps you've heard it, but it's really worth hearing again and quite entertaining. It's entitled The Cookie Thief by Valerie Cox. A woman was waiting at an airport one night with several long hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in the airport shops, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man sitting beside her, as bold as could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag in between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. So she munched the cookies and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking, if I wasn't so nice, I would blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. When only one was left, she wondered what he would do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve and he's also rude. Why, he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed to the gate, refusing to look back at that thieving ingrate. So she boarded the plane and she sank in her seat. Then she sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. If mine are here, She moaned in despair. The others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. Self-regulation. That's where you communicate beliefs and feelings openly, and you defend, civil with boundaries, your rights and values in a socially acceptable, non-offensive, non-destructive manner. In other words, holding a boundary is done in a non-destructive manner. To some, holding a boundary means they can be rude. They can go over the top. That's not civility with boundaries. That's not self-regulation. When I did research on bullying, workplace bullying, and emotional intelligence, I found that there was absolutely no advantage to being passive, being nice, if you will. The passive voice is not heard. Happiness level is low. Passivity is usually a manifestation of playing the victim or being flipped. It's where PTSD and CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, come from, and prediction error. Next, self-motivation. This is the epitome of being a lifelong learner. It's the willingness to persistently try to improve oneself and engage in the pursuit of personally relevant and meaningful objectives that lead to a rich and enjoyable life. So, years ago, I used to think that I had a real problem. I was a self-help junkie. I would go into the used bookstores in Tacoma near the Tacoma Dome, and every time I walked in and I'd say, hey, can you help me find this book? He'd go, yeah, it's in self-help. And after years of this repeated behavior, I got to thinking, man, I'm a self-help junkie. Now, let me tell you the difference between the two, because I've kind of figured this out, and I want to make sure that you understand it. Remember, knowledge is not power. Just because you've read a book, just because you've heard a lecture, or, and in my case, been to my office, it doesn't mean you know the material. It means you've heard it. You might be able to verbalize it and articulate it. But if you can't do it, it's worthless. Knowledge is not power unless you can apply the knowledge. Applied knowledge is power, and it leads to wisdom. That's a huge difference. So a self-help junkie has a short shelf life. They read to medicate the pain. I feel good. See my bookshelf? Oh, I have the same books you do. Many of my clients come in knowing the material, sometimes better than I do. But where they fall short is they are junkies. They're not lifelong learners. They have a fixed mindset. They use the term, I know, I know, I know. I know is the most insane, stupid, unintelligent thing you could possibly say. Because if you knew, you would do. How many people know they shouldn't be eating fast food all the time? How many people know, fill in the blanks? And then you use this research, this knowledge, alleged knowledge you have, or information, to judge others, to find fault in others. That's not a lifelong learner. A lifelong learner seeks for universal principles. They study because they want to change. They're the change agent. The reward is learning, and they question their self-assumptions. And they learn how to question all assumptions. Jim Rohn said the greatest gift you can give somebody is your own personal development, not trying to fix somebody else. I followed up with, most people silently think, if you will behave in a manner that fits my immaculate perception and give me permission to correct you when necessary, we'll both be happy. That's not true. And then far better to say, I'll focus on me for the mutual benefit of our relationship and trust that you'll take care of you, and then you focus only on myself and you focus on yourself. Empathy, as mentioned. It's recognizing, understanding, and appreciating how other people feel. Empathy is the ability to articulate your understanding of their perspective through their eyes. Straightforward. That's what it is. You are not part of empathy. It's the ability to understand what they're going through. And lastly, interpersonal relationships. It is the quintessential place to be. It's the skill of developing and maintaining satisfying relationships based on mutual trust and respect. The most important, self-awareness. The most difficult, empathy. You nail them down, you get interpersonal relationships, emotional intimacy, or mutual trust and respect. Thanks.